Hi, greetings, it's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and this is video number 10 of my Human Resource Management series. And this particular video is going to talk about managing employees for performance. Once you've made the decision to hire employees, or you've helped managers hire employees, then it's your duty as a human resource professional to help make sure that you're setting employees up for success to help them meet organizational goals. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, in the human resource world, we call this performance management. And it really is important that you understand the processes of performance management systems. There are essentially 5 criteria for measuring the effectiveness of a performance management system that I'll talk about anyway. And there are some major methods for measuring performance. We're going to talk about some of those. And we're going to talk about sources of performance information in terms of their advantages and disadvantages. We also need to consider things like rating errors and how to explain and minimize them. We need to make sure that we're fair with employees and setting employees up for success so they stay with our organization, right? And giving feedback is one of the most important process improvement things that we can do with an employee. So we need to make sure that we're doing it ethically and we're doing it thoughtfully and we're doing the right things for the right reasons, right? And so when you have employees that are giving unsatisfactory performance, it really is wise to help bring them back and get them on the right track. And I want to talk a little bit about some legal and ethical issues that can affect performance management. So, what is performance management? Essentially, performance management is the process by which managers ensure that employees' activities and outputs contribute to the organizational goals. It really requires processes that involve knowing what activities and outputs are desired, observing whether or not those activities and processes occur, and then providing feedback to help employees meet expectations. Simple enough. So here are the steps in performance management, the process. So step 1, define the performance outcomes for the company, division, or department. 2, develop employee goals, behavior, and actions, and achieve outcomes. Step number 3, provide support and ongoing performance discussions. Step 4, evaluate performance. Step 5, identify improvements needed. And step 6, provide consequences for performance results. So we have to really be very, very clear in helping people understand what's expected of them, and ethically we need to help them get there, and that's a process. So this is why clear communication is so important, and constant communication, to guide employees and draw out their talents, right? So the purpose of performance management is pretty simple. There's a strategic purpose. You have got to make sure that effective performance management helps the organization achieve its business objectives, whatever those things are, clearly tied in with their mission and vision, right? There's an administrative purpose, and this is about the ways in which organizations use the system to provide information for day-to-day decisions about salary, benefit, and also recognition programs. Developmental purpose. This really serves on the basis for developing employees, their knowledge, and their skills. We talked about that in an earlier video, right? So the criteria for effective performance management really should be fit with the strategy, validity, reliability, acceptability, and then specific feedback. So there is somewhat of a science that should take place here, because you want to be fair and you want to be very, very clear in helping the employee understand what's effective, and then you want to be able to measure it in an accurate way. And with job performance measures, we always have to consider contamination, validity, and deficiency. Is what's happening really happening, or do we actually have a real measure of what is really taking place? Because sometimes what we see is not the full picture of what we see, or there may be other things clouding our judgment about what we're seeing, or we may not have the right tools in measuring those things. So there's a lot of different ways to make comparisons. Sometimes doing simple ranking, alternative ranking is one thing that's used, forced distribution, and then paired comparison. So with a comparative approach, you have generally high validity. It really depends on the rater, but usually there's no measure of agreement used. It's got moderate acceptability, and the specificity is very low. With attribute performance measurement, there really is a low link with managers as it's the fit with strategy is concerned. Validity can be low, reliability can be low, and acceptability is high, and so not really the best measure. Behavioral, this can be high as with a fit of strategy. You're watching your observations, and the validity is high, and it minimizes contamination and deficiency. It's reliable, and it's moderately acceptable, and the specificity is very high. With results, it's very high with strategy. You can it can be very, very high with validity, and high with reliability, and high with acceptability, and has a high regard with specificity. Quality is another thing that's got high fit with strategy, high with validity, high reliability, high acceptability, and then high specificity. So when you are using rating attributes, you can use a graphic rating scale, and this is a scale that lists the traits and provides a rating scale for each trait. The employer uses the scale to indicate the extent to which an employee displays each trait. And you can use a mixed standard scale, which uses several statements describing each trait to produce a final score for that trait. So an example of a graphic rating scale, you can have the different performance areas like knowledge, communication, judgment, managerial skill, quality performance, teamwork, interpersonal skill, initiative, creativity, problem solving, and each of those performance dimensions can have a scale from 5 being distinguished, 4 excellent, 3 commendable, 2 adequate, and 1 poor. And you can take time to think about your experiences as it relates to working with this employee and the evidence of the outputs in order to rate the individual. Rating behaviors, you could use a critical incident method, which has specific examples of employees acting in ways that are either effective or ineffective, and employees receive feedback about what they do well and what they do poorly, and how they are helping the organization achieve its goals. Or there's something called BARS, or Behavioral Anchored Rating Scale, and this is a scale that shows specific statements of behavior that describe different levels of performance. So with rating behaviors, Behavioral Observation Scale, or BOS, is a variation of BARS, and it uses all behaviors necessary for effective performance to rate and performance at task. And BOS, or Behavioral Observation Scale, also asks the manager to rate frequency with which the employee has exhibited the behavior during that rating period. Organizational Behavior Modification, or OBM, is a plan for managing behavior of employees through a formal system of feedback and reinforcement. So BOS, an example, is about maybe overcoming resistance to change. And it may be your duty as a manager to rate from 1 being almost never to 5 almost always, on things like describes the detail of the change to employees, explains why the change is necessary, describes how the change will affect employees, listens to employees' concerns, asks the employee for help in making the change work, and if necessary specifies the date for follow-up meeting to respond to employees' concerns. So you can have a rating scale for each of those. So when you are measuring the results, productivity is an important measure of success because getting more done with a smaller amount of resources, like money or people, increases the company's profits, right? Management by objectives, or MBO, is an important thing that managers must consider. People at each level of the organizations are setting goals in a process that flows from the top to the bottom so that all levels are contributing to the organization's overall goals. And these goals become the standards for evaluating each employee's performance. So management by objectives, you could have a key result, an objective, and then be able to analyze what percentage of complete it is and to derive the actual performance. For instance, maybe you have a loan portfolio management. That's your key area result. And the objective is to increase the portfolio value by 10% over the next 12 months. You hear the very specific language there? And so when you are rating the employee, you can be able to assess what percentage it is completed, and then look at the actual performance, and so that would be documented. Say you are rating a salesperson, and the objective is to generate a fee income of $30,000 over the next 12 months. Well, that could be 150% complete, and that salesperson may have actually generated a fee of over $5,000 over the 12 months. So good record keeping and feedback really helps increase the performance of an employee. Total quality management is also something that human resource managers are always working with managers for. And this is also called TQM, and it's approach to performance management which involves employees and their internal and external customers working together to improve overall customer satisfaction. So it really is about the big picture. And TQM provides methods for performance measurement and management, and it combines measurements with attributes and results. And there really are two kinds of feedback in TQM: subjective feedback and statistical quality. So 360-degree performance appraisals are another system that we use, and performance measures include getting evaluations from managers, peers, subordinates that they rate themselves, and also from customers from times. So performance management truly is critical for talent management system, and really should involve one-on-one contact with managers to ensure that proper training and development are taking place. There are errors in performance management that happen all the time, and so you have to really be careful and look for contrast errors, where you're comparing individuals not against an objective standard but against other employees. You have distributional errors where the rater tends to use only one part of a rating scale, and there's something called leniency where the reviewer rates everyone near the top, or strictness where the rater favors lower rankings, or central tendency where the rater puts everyone near the middle of the scale. And so it really kind of depends on each manager. There is such a thing called rater bias that needs to be understood, and raters let their opinion of one quality color their opinion of others. And so the halo error, which is a bias in a favorable direction that can mistakenly tell employees that they don't need to improve in any area, or Horn's area, where there's a bias which involves negative ratings, and this can cause employees to feel frustrated and defensive. And I talk about these concepts in my human relations series. Ways to reduce errors. Employee rate fictional employees and discuss their rating errors. Actual examples of various performances are studied, and then data analytics can be used to find patterns. Political behavior and performance appraisal is also very common. Sometimes managers distort the performance evaluation to advance one's personal goals, and very often they minimize appraisal politics with a calibration meeting, and that's a meeting in which managers discuss employee performance ratings and provide evidence for supporting their ratings with the goal of influencing the rating errors. You must do performance feedback correctly. It's not something that can be thrown together. You're abusing an employee if you are not doing it properly. So here's some things to consider when giving performance feedback. You need to consider scheduling the feedback. It should be regularly and I really believe that annual feedback is not enough. I think daily is a good way of helping keep employees engaged and knowing what they're doing right and what they're not doing right. Employees should receive feedback so often that they know what the manager will say during their performance review. That's a good test. When you're preparing for a feedback session, make sure that you are thinking of what that process is going to be looking like and giving fair, objective feedback. When giving performance feedback, you need to do it in an appropriate meeting place. It should be in a setting that's neutral and also free of distraction. This is your time to help an employee understand how valuable they are and praise them for what they're doing well and help them see opportunities for what they can be doing better. So essentially there are three things that take place when giving feedback. There's tell and sell, tell and listen, and problem solving. And you should be able to develop good skill in doing each of these things. Tell and sell is when a manager tells employees their ratings and then justifies those ratings. Tell and listen is when a manager tells their employees their ratings and then let the employees explain their point of view, and you really have to do good listening in there. And then problem solving. Managers and employees work together to solve problems. So when you are doing feedback, you really must find solutions for performance. It really depends on what the employee lacks, and sometimes it's about three things essentially: motivation, ability, or resources. And I blame the manager when you have someone who doesn't have the right ability. It could be a hiring issue. You didn't hire the right person, or you didn't give them proper training and follow through on the training, and then make sure that you're coaching people at the right time. Motivation could be a number of different things. Maybe you haven't given the person a raise in a long time. Maybe they have things going on at home, and then you can be kind of a coach there and show that you care. A lot of things affect motivation, and so in my relationship video series I talk about how to motivate employees. Lack of any of these could be a reason why there are performance problems, and it really is your job as a manager to help be able to evaluate what's going on and help move people back into high motivation and help them become solid performers, right? So there are some legal requirements for performance management, and you should consider the Uniform Guidelines on Employee Selection Procedures. It requires organizations to make sure criteria such as race and age as employment decisions are done fairly. Unjust dismissal is something that should be considered. The usual claim is that a person has been dismissed for reasons besides ones that the employer states, and then performance management systems provide evidence to support an organization's employment decisions. Electronic monitoring and employee privacy are some legal and ethical issues that could come up. And so you need to make sure that you have records of employees' performance ratings, disciplinary actions, and work violations stored in electronic databases. And electronic monitoring can improve productivity. It also generates some privacy concerns, so you need to be aware of that. So essentially, I've given you a lot to consider about performance management. There's a strategic purpose, an administrative purpose, and some developmental purposes that we talked about. Self-appraisals, performance information, 360-degree evaluations, feedback is absolutely crucial. So I've given you a lot to think about in this 20-minute video. So I hope there's been some things in here that you're taking away that you can use to apply to help you create a life and career that you truly love. And more importantly than that, I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.